Hi, and welcome to video 2 of the two-part series on using NVivo for survey analysis. In this video, we will be covering how NVivo can help organize and code survey data, and then exploring queries and visualization options for survey data in NVivo. So first, we're going to open up NVivo. Okay, so now that we have NVivo pulled up, we can see that I have the sample survey results pulled up already. We previously learned how to download survey data in the last video. So if you have not watched that one and need to know how to upload survey data into NVivo, please watch that one. There's a bunch of tips and things to go over when you're importing survey data using this import survey wizard. So um, once you've imported it, it should be under files, and unless you've saved it somewhere else, it'll automatically go to files, and then just double click it and it should pop up. So NVivo can be particularly useful in making survey data more manageable to view using filtering, form and table viewing, auto coding, open-ended responses, and coding can also organize data by themes and trends. So that's a little bit of what we're going over in this video. So filters allow users to filter data sets based on the respondents' selected responses. So for instance, if we go further down in our data set, we can see that we have we should have some responses for different demographic questions like gender, for instance. So if I want to filter and just look at um, values where someone identified as female, that's possible just by filtering the data here. So if it's filtered, you'll see that that the column has the filter symbol in the right-hand corner in red. If it's not filtered, then it will be clear. If you want to unfilter it, you would just hit it again and just hit clear filter here. Keep in mind, once it's filtered, if you're running any queries or trying to look at anything else at your data, you really need to make sure if you're not trying to filter it, you un unclear you unfilter it and clear that filter. So once you are done using the filter, please make sure you clear it, or you may have trouble later um, seeing all of your data. So this filtering feature just makes data sets more manageable to view. If you're going through a large survey data set and you're trying to compare responses from different groups or demographics of respondents, then this filtering function can be pretty useful. You don't have to filter just by demographics. You can filter by any question. So if I only want to look at people that strongly agreed in Q4, but yeah, you can filter by any of the responses. Just make sure the text would match when it's a response from like a multiple choice question. Make sure it matches the text. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that filter again. Just wanted to show you another example that wasn't a demographic question. So clear filter. And there we go. All right. So that is a very useful feature for trying to make looking through the data set just a little more manageable. Another feature that can do that is the form versus table viewing. So right now we're on the table viewing, which is the automatic default that it goes to, but there's also, if you look on the right-hand side, there's a form option. Uh, so you'll see two tabs, table and form. The table tab will show you the entire data set in table format like we have right now, but the form tab We click that. It allows you to go through each response individually in a form by clicking the arrows at the bottom. So this is record 1. This is our first respondent. And if we click the arrows at the bottom, we can go through to record 2, record 3, and so on and so forth. So this viewing option just gives you another way of looking at your data to frame it by individual responses versus the data set as a whole. You can always switch back and forth depending on your research needs. But also note filtering the table will also filter the individual forms as well. So if you've filtered to only have people that strongly agreed with question 4, when you go to the forms, you will also only get the views of the people that strongly agreed to that question. So keep that in mind that filtering works on both of these viewing things, and to make sure you clear your filters once you are done using them, or they will affect the rest of the functions in NVivo. All right, so next we're going to go over auto-coded open-ended responses. The open-ended responses should have been auto-coded underneath the Codes tab on the left-hand side panel. Our sample survey had 2 open-ended questions. Oh, here's our example survey separated out. So here's our auto-coded responses for Q2 and the auto-coded responses for Q5. So for the example surveys, since they are just test responses from Qualtrics, which are just fake responses that Qualtrics creates to test your survey, they will not make sense, but that's okay. So these are the responses for the 2 open-ended questions we had. So if you want to change the name of the questions, you can right-click them. So if you didn't change them during import, you can also always right-click them and then go to code properties here, and you can rename them. So if you want them to have a name that's more descriptive of what the question was asking, so it'll be easier when you're going back through your analysis and looking at different variables and stuff. That's possible here. You would, again, right-click, hit properties, and then you can type in a new name and description. I'm just going to leave it how it is since this is just an example. So I'm going to hit cancel. If you double click the question like I did before, it'll pull open all of the responses so you can look at them as a set. It allows you to view open-ended responses at once to code them more easily. So instead of going through each survey response, like all 82 of them, and going through the entire response, you can just code the free response on its own by itself. So from here, I can directly code all the open-ended responses without having to navigate the rest of the data. So it just makes it a little more streamlined. And it also can make it easier to identify some common themes that may be appearing across open-ended responses and make your coding just easier. So to code survey data, that's what we're going to do next. With coding survey data in NVivo, you can use any of the viewing options that I just went over. And then after that, it's just coding the way you normally would in NVivo by highlighting the text you would like to code, and then you can drag it and drop it into current codes. So for an example, here's my codes for the sample project, and I can just highlight and then drag and drop into a code. So I'm going to drag and drop this into attitude. And as you can see, attitude now has one reference. In addition, you can also right click and hit code selection. And if it's a recent code, you can do here. And as you can see, attitude has popped up. I'm just going to hit code selection just so you can see. And here's all your codes right here. And you would just select one and then hit code selection. And then it'll code it there. And then lastly, if you want to create a new code, you would just go to the bottom of your codes and you can drag and drop it into the blank space and create a new code here. Or again, you can right click and just hit code selection and just hit create new. And then you can type in the code here. I'm just gonna that. But yeah, so those are just a few options. I prefer the drag and drop just because it's pretty easy for me and it just goes faster. But yeah, those are all options for coding open-ended responses. Um, and keep in mind, you can do this from any of the viewing options we saw. So if you want to do it looking at all the free response questions like this, that's fine. You can also go back to your data set and go to the free response questions in the chart in the data set. And you can code from here as well. Or you can use the form option and scroll down to where they have the free response and highlight there. So all of it can be coded in whichever view makes sense for you and your project, whichever's easiest. But keep in mind, if you've coded it once, you don't want to code it again. So pick one of the options for your coding, just so you don't have repeat coding, and it'll just make it easier for later when you're going through and analyzing your data. All right, so for further assistance or any guidance on general coding, you can also see the Introduction to NVivo tutorial if you need any further instruction on coding. So next, we're just going to go over some queries and visualization options with NVivo. So if we go to our Explore tab, you'll see different queries and visualization options. Queries allow us to see how language is being used in our data set or within our entire NVivo project if you are uploading multiple files. So for more information on different types of queries, you can see the introduction tutorial. We're going to just go over a few examples and apply them to survey research. NVivo allows users to run queries within specific folders, such as file classifications and cases. So that's the main thing I'm going to be showing you. That can be helpful for survey data because it allows you to run a query within the case classifications we created when we imported our survey data. So this feature allows you to run queries specifically within the folders where the open-ended survey responses were auto-coded, for instance. So you can run a query within the folder for question 5, which, as you can see on our screen, is a free response question. So if we only want to run our query to see how language is being used and how people are responding to question 5, that's possible to do by using a query and selecting that folder. You can also search for most frequently used words in the responses of the question, or you can search within a case folder as well. But the case you search within has to be in its own folder. So keep that in mind. You can create its own folder if you want to search within a specific case. So let's do an example of that. We're going to do so word frequencies right here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do select items, and we're going to go back to codes and expand it and go to our example survey, and then just hit question 5. All right. And let's go with the 10 most frequently used words and run that query. All right, so our 10 most frequently used words are here. And that's just within the responses to question 5. So that is one way you can use this folder function in NVivo, is to separate out more specific queries for your data. So it just helps you be more specific in what you're searching for and looking for, and just helps you go through your data a little differently. So the next thing I'm going to show you is then how to run a query and use case classifications. So unfortunately, NVivo is not able to run most of the queries within a specific case classification, except for the matrix query and coding queries. So for these, you have to have coding already done. But this will allow you to see the coding that has been done within your case classification groups, which are a lot of times different demographics. So keep in mind that this function will only provide results once coding has been performed by the researcher. So if you haven't done any coding, you won't get any results. And also the results will only be good as the coding that's been completed. So keep that in mind too if you're not finished coding, that as you finish, the results will just be more and more helpful. So I'm going to close out this word frequency query here. And I'm going to close out the example questions as well, and just close out the rest of this text. All right. So to do a matrix coding query, let's go back to Explore. And we can select the matrix coding query here next to the text search. And here you can select rows and columns. So rows will be first and columns second. You just hit the little plus sign at the bottom. All right, so to select our rows and columns, I'm gonna hit the plus sign. And I'm gonna go to case classifications, and under survey respondents, I'm gonna expand that, and you can select any case classifications that were in your survey. I'm gonna do the gender question and then hit OK. Okay, apparently it's taking a second. And make sure it selected all of them. I'm not sure it selected all of them when I hit that. So if you expand it, you can go under, select all there. And there we go. So the different gender options are selected. And then we're going to go to columns and hit select items. and go to codes. And you can choose which codes that you want to see in your columns to compare the coding between different groups of survey respondents. So I'll do economy, funding, and attitude as my codes and then hit OK. And there we go. Oh, and it did end up pulling up all of our survey categories. I guess it just wasn't showing up here for some reason, but that's okay. It ended up in the matrix. So these queries basically create a matrix that shows the coding intersections between at least two lists of items. The matrix queries create the table you can see now with the project items. So we used case classifications or attributes as the rows, and we use two particular codes as the columns. So now we can see the intersections between these variables. So if we want to, we can look at how attitude has been coded for each demographic by clicking on the reference, the number that's in the chart, and that'll pull up the reference that's in that chart. I'm going to close that out just so we can look at the full chart again. And as you can see, there's not a lot of coding that's been done, but the two references that were coded are here and can be pulled up just by clicking on the number. And you can also view this as a chart using the chart tab on the right-hand side. And then that'll also make it so you can compare through a visual how the coding was differentiated in whatever demographic group or just other different attribute groups that are in your survey. So, and again, you can click on the bars as well to pull open the reference. There we go. So that is one option that has both a query and a visualization. That's pretty helpful. We're going to go over some more visualizations and wrap up as we're wrapping up. So you can create charts, diagrams, and other visualizations for selected items, just like we've done here. But you can also create word clouds and charts displaying coding for specific file classifications, codes, cases. So we're going to go over an example just to generate a visualization for a case classification folder. So let's go to one of our questions. I'm going to go back to auto-coded survey responses. Here we go. And under question 5, I'm going to select it and then just hit, oh. All right, I'm going to close this out. All right, so if I select question 5, then I can hit visualize. And you can visualize it as a word cloud. Okay, there we go. Just took a little bit of time to load. There is our word cloud. I'm gonna close it out and just show one more query. One more visualization. Select question 5, hit visualize, and I'm just going to do a chart of coding. So there hasn't been any coding that's been done for question 5. So you don't see any coding yet, but that's all right. It's just an example, but typically you would have a bar graph of the coding that's been done. All right, I'm gonna close that out. And then, so that's how to do some visualizations for cases and codes. You can also do this with cases by going to a case and so these are all our survey respondents. They all have a different randomly assigned ID. But if you wanted to do one specifically for an individual respondent, you would just do this and hit visualize as well. Since there hasn't been a lot of coding done, I'm not going to visualize it, but it would just show the coding for that individual case, or in this case, for this individual survey response. So any coding that's been done on an individual survey response, you could visualize here. And then, so those are the two ways to code either codes or, sorry, to visualize either codes or cases. You can also visualize case classifications, though there's just not as many options. So if we go to our survey respondents and then go to one of our case classifications, so I will do gender again and select it. You can hit visualize, chart cases by attribute value. And there we go. That just shows you out of all of our survey respondents, this is how many people have answered based on the case classification responses. So it'll show, in this case, since the question's about gender, it'll show you how many people selected male, female, and so on and so forth, whether they answered unassigned or prefer to self-describe. You can see all of that here in a bar chart. And also keep in mind with all of these, you'll have options for customizing the visuals at the top once you've selected the chart. So you can change the title and the axes. You can often change the colors and other visualizations. You edit the labels, etc. So for customizing your chart and changing the aesthetics of it, make sure you check the top menu bar for any customization options. So those are different visualization options. I hope that this video tutorial has been helpful and that these features have given you options for organizing your survey data and then analyzing it with coding queries and creating different visuals to help you analyze your survey results. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found it helpful.